Welcome to Crossroads. I'm your host, Joshua Phillip, and today we have Antonia Okafur. She's the founder of Empowered, which works on Second Amendment rights and educating youth about Second Amendment rights. And so tell us about why you started this organization. What was the problem you saw that you kind of wanted to go and do this?
Yeah, I think it shocks a little. It kind of shocks people when I say the main reason was because I started out as a feminist. I believe that if we really want the progression of the equality of rights between the sexes, then the gun rights aspect of it is so important to that. It's essential to that argument. And so I started out as an activist on college campuses, bringing concealed carry on college campuses in Texas. And I wanted to bring my reason for bringing that legislation to light, for promoting concealed carry on campus, which was, I'm a sexual assault survivor and I want other women to feel empowered, truly feel empowered on campus. So why not push for that? And then starting my organization Empowered, which is really bringing the gun rights movement to young females, because really I believe that they're the new face of the gun rights movement going forward.
Yeah, well, remember too that the gun was the great equalizer.
Absolutely.
Funny as it was. And you look back, you want to get rid of guns and go back to the days of swords and armor. Fine, you want to do that? Remember what that was like. The guys who had armor were basically invincible. The peasants with their cheap pitchforks or whatever didn't stand much chance.
Right.
And when most people talk about getting rid of guns, they're not talking about getting rid of guns. They're talking about getting rid of the guns that the average person can have. So the only people with guns are the people in power.
Absolutely.
They're not talking about getting rid of guns. They're talking about making it so only a select class of individuals is able to have guns.
Oh yeah, well, you can always see that, and you can see that in history, whether it's African Americans. It's a rich history of gun control when it comes to oppressing African Americans. From it first started out with slave codes, and then went to black codes after slavery was abolished, and then went to Jim Crow laws, and et cetera, to what we have modern day gun control, which is really imposing all of these gun control laws that only help the criminal, those who don't care about the law, and then also at the same time just empowering those law-abiding citizens in the inner city or the urban areas or what have you. The historically oppressed people have always been oppressed because they're the ones that don't have the ability to rise above that. And what have the oppressors used? They've always used guns. They've always used some type of means of a weapon to oppress those people. So even with women, the women's suffrage movement, a lot of that going from the west to the east coast, what was the common denominator there? Well, the women in Wyoming, for example, which is the first state to grant universal suffrage to women and allow women to run for office and be in public office, well, they're in the Wild West. They're the ones who had the guns, who had to protect their property and those people they cared about with a gun. So we've always seen that correlation between gun rights and helping those who are once oppressed to get out of that oppression.
Yeah, so you're going around college campuses talking about concealed carry on campuses.
Right.
How does that blow over?
Well, I get interesting reactions. A lot of people who are inviting me to speak usually are at least those who have some commonality of what I'm talking about, and they believe to a certain degree. But I really, doing this for the years I've done it, I've seen Republicans who have been against it and Democrats who've been for it. It kind of depends on how you spin it. For example, when it comes to knife rights, actually New York, they use the criminal justice reform type of scenario of getting Democrats on board, because really those who were really prosecuted the most were African American and Latino men and women, because at the end of the day, all these laws that we have on the books really just set to add more laws, more things that really keep people, especially those who are in low income or not able to do it the right way, right? Because the right way involves permits, involves money that a lot of people don't have. But unfortunately, everyone has to deal with the safety issue. So things like that really have been able to be the common ground of, our Second Amendment rights have nothing to do with being left or right or being Democrat, Republican, or Libertarian. It is a God-given right. It's even beyond the scope of being an American. It's a God-given human right that we have as human beings.
That's an interesting point. Actually, at Epoch Times, we had some really good articles about this. The right to self-defense, which is something that is protected in just about every traditional law that we've ever had in history,
right,
including the Magna Carta and including even in UN law, funny enough. You know what I mean?
And they've definitely messed that
you
up.
read into, yeah, I think they interpret it their own way.
A little bit, yeah.
But when you talk about the right to self-defense, that individuals should have a right to defend themselves, when their lives or their property is, threatened by
Absolutely.
some, oppressive power, which is again why these laws were created in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
And like I said too, the gun was the great equalizer. The gun is something that allows a frail person to fight against some huge, bulky, strong person. It's someone who has never had a fight in their life challenge someone who's been training their whole lives for a fight.
Absolutely.
It is something that makes the average person on par with a huge state government machine.
Right.
It's between sexes, between races, everything. It's
Right.
something that evens the line. You want to talk about equality, right?
Absolutely, and that's the thing is that it is true equality, but unfortunately, I think that's what we see through a lot of women like me see through the modern feminist movement, the modern feminist wave, the third wave, that really seeks to really push a radical leftist agenda, which has nothing to do with actually empowering women. We can go talk about the abortion issue and gun control. Really, what do those two things have in common? Well, they're all about making sure that you're disempowering a certain group of individuals, those who are the most vulnerable, the most defenseless, and then keeping those people vulnerable so that you can seek power, you can gain power. Well, what if we actually had a feminist movement, which is really original feminist movement, that didn't see things that way? We don't have to disempower other people in order to be empowered ourselves. We don't have to, tear down men and say that they're horrible in order to be on the equal footing as a man. So I think that's why I am a feminist and why I continue to say that I am, is because really we had that term first. We did. Our values were synonymous with feminism and with equality. And so we're just trying to bring that back. And that's what I'm doing with Empowered and in teaching these young women that they are empowered. They don't have to disempower other groups in order to do so.
So what was your journey? You said you're feminist, but not third wave feminist. What was your
Right.
journey? What was your journey in terms of understanding that difference?
Yeah, well, I actually came from the probably third wave feminist type of movement of growing up and thinking like that was what I needed to do in order to be a person that really pushed for female empowerment. It wasn't until I realized that there was something missing in this conversation of feminism. We're talking about empowering other people, having the choice, right? The right to choose, but yet I don't have the right to choose how I defend myself and where I defend myself. And that's where I got into the whole scenario with the whole space of concealed carry on college campuses. If we're going to talk about rape culture, we're going to talk about sexual assault on campus, then why aren't we also having the conversation of what we can do to prevent things like that from happening? What you see from the left is a lot of, let's talk about it after the fact. Let's talk about the men who are the perpetrators. But what can we do for the women so they don't never get in that scenario in the first place? And if they are in that scenario, what can they do in order to get out of it? And so that's why I became really passionate about, there's something missing with this modern feminist movement that seeks to actually keep me from really empowering myself, taking safety into my own hands, and the peers that I have around me, the other females that I have around me, to keep them from the whole Me Too movement. We don't want the Me Too movement to perpetuate, right? We want a #NotMe movement. We want something that's going to keep them from ever getting to that space in the first place. So I think that's the mentality that I wanted to push.
And this is interesting, right? The stop the problem before it's a problem, rather than allow the problem and be a victim, right?
Absolutely, the victim mentality.
It's a totally different way of thinking.
Yes.
And I think this ties to some really interesting principles too. It's one that I think defines maybe the values that this country was built on, right? The idea of self-governance, of taking responsibility for your life, and right?
Absolutely.
And having your own thing and defending your own thing, and
Absolutely.
being an individual, as opposed to this new wave, right? Which is about basically just laying over and letting the government control your life for you, right?
Absolutely.
You're no longer an individual, you're just a cog in a machine.
Right.
That's what it's all built on, right?
Yeah, and it comes, and that's why people are seeing through this agenda, that it's not really about them. It's not really about helping me as an individual. It's what they have to push. So just trying to see, just try to help other people, educate them, and and doing that with Empower, doing that with speeches like I'm going to be talking at the Western Conservative Summit tomorrow, a lot about those things, about faith, about female empowerment, about the Second Amendment, because really they go together. They're not mutually exclusive, they do go together. So just trying to convince more souls about that.
I like it. So you found an interesting way to talk about the values this country was built on.
It's crazy.
They're pretty hip when you frame them a bit different, right?
Absolutely. People get mad when I say that I'm a feminist and I have those values, because that's part of their agenda. They don't want you to understand that. They don't want you to actually know your history. People say, as a Black conservative, I always get, you don't know your history, you don't know this, right? No, actually, I do know my history. The reason why I am the way I am today is because I did a lot of digging. I did a lot of research on my own and found out what I actually believe for myself. And it seems that what history shows, what the facts show, is that I'm actually empowered through those values. So I'm not a victim like the media wants me to believe. So yeah.
I love it. Great. So maybe just a couple more minutes. What would you tell kind of the average college student out there who's where you were maybe at the beginning of this movement? If you were to say, look at yourself when you were just kind of trying to find your way around this way of thinking, what do you think you would tell yourself to kind of help you understand where you're at now?
If I would go back to my college self and kind of say, hey, you're gonna, I would say that so I think it's always been about me trying to seek empowerment, because at a young age I was at the most vulnerable and the most defenseless I could have ever been, being a sexual assault survivor. And so that's always shaped my path of wanting to seek some type of way to gain that power back. And you see the empowered logo, the emblem, the power part of empowered is highlighted. And it's for a reason. It's because we forget that there's that power aspect of empowerment. And going back to everything that you believe in, I would tell my college self, what do you believe? How does that reconcile to what you actually are doing, and how is that reconciled to actual empowerment? Are you not only empowering yourself, but are you empowering those women around you that you seek to empower? And I think a lot of people, when they start going backwards into, okay, I believe in abortion. Well, am I really empowering someone that can't even be born yet? Or a woman that can't even be born because, well, we empower this other individual to end someone else's life that wasn't even their own? Well, that's not really empowerment. Or is it empowerment to go back to gun control of, I don't trust other people around me, so I don't believe that they should have the right to actually have self-defense? Well, how is that empowering to that person, that individual you say that you seek to empower? So I think a lot of those different types of things really will be encouraging for the college student, the college woman who's trying to figure out what female empowerment literally looks like, because feminism, the media says it looks a certain way, and if you deter out of that box, then you're not actually a feminist, and people are afraid to speak up. So I would tell my young self that I want you to look back into actual empowerment and see if what you believe in actually empowers you and those around you.
Great. Antonia, pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Everyone, please remember to like and subscribe. See you next time.